You always loved the quiet. Out here in the gas giant's rings, it was a symphony of silence. Ice and rock tumbled in a slow, endless dance. Your small scavenger ship, the Stardust Drifter, was your whole world. It was a lonely life, a profitable one if you were lucky. You mostly found scrap metal and frozen minerals, enough to buy fuel and synth stew for the next cycle. But today was different. You saw something that did not belong. It was a ship, a ghost ship, a colossal shadow hiding in the asteroid belt. It was dark, impossibly dark. It seemed to drink the light of the distant sun. Your ship's sensors saw nothing, just a gravity anomaly, a blank spot where something massive should be. But you could see it, with your own eyes. It was ancient. Its lines were smooth and organic, not like the hard angles of human tech. No one else had ever reported it. It was as if it waited just for you. A strange feeling washed over you. Not fear. It was a pull, a deep and resonant hum in your soul. The ship was calling to you. You knew it sounded crazy. The kind of thing that happens when you spend too much time alone. The kind of story spacers tell before they vanish forever. But you couldn't resist. You fired your thrusters. The Stardust Drifter crept toward the silent giant. The call grew stronger. A song of welcome, a promise of secrets. You docked with a soft hiss of mag clamps. The ghost ship's airlock cycled open without a command, as if it knew you were here, as if it had been expecting you for 1,000 years. You stepped inside. The air was stale but breathable, and the silence inside was even deeper than the void. It was the silence of a tomb that was about to wake up. The hallways were vast. They curved in ways that tricked your eyes. The walls felt like cool, smooth stone. No lights guided your way, only the faint glow from your helmet lamp. Your footsteps made no sound. They were swallowed by the immense emptiness. You felt like a single thought in a sleeping mind, a mind that was slowly beginning to stir. You were not afraid. The ship felt familiar, like a half-remembered dream from your childhood. You walked for what felt like hours, deeper and deeper into the vessel's heart. Finally, you reached the bridge. It was a massive cavern. A single command chair sat before a sweeping viewport. The stars outside looked cold and distant. In the center of the room was a console, a smooth black altar of unknown material. It was dark, cold to the touch. It was the heart of the ship, and it was dead, or so you thought. You reached out your hand. Your gloved fingers hesitated for a moment. What were you doing? This was madness. You should run. Get back to your ship and flee this place. But you couldn't. The song in your head was now a clear, single note. It urged you forward. You pressed your palm flat against the console. A jolt went through you, not of electricity, but of life. The ship shuddered. A low hum vibrated up from the floor. Lights flickered on around you, soft white light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The console beneath your hand warmed. Patterns of light swirled across its surface. The viewport shimmered, then cleared. It showed you the system not as a picture, but as a living map of gravity. The ship was awake, and you were its pilot. It sang a new song now, a song of reunion. The console showed you everything, the planet below, its moons, the asteroid field you called home. But the controls were strange. They were not for thrusters, not for weapons. They were for gravity itself. The ship's mind, a silent, knowing presence, poured knowledge into you. You understood. The ship did not fly through space. It told space where to go. A power you could barely comprehend, was at your fingertips. You started small, a gentle tug on a nearby asteroid. It drifted from its path, a puppet on an invisible string. You felt a thrill, a sense of power that was intoxicating. What else could you do? You looked at the gas giant below, the massive world that had defined your entire life. It was a backdrop, a constant, a god in its own sky. What if you could move a god? The thought was terrifying. It was blasphemy against the laws of star science. But the ship whispered encouragement. It showed you how. You wrapped the ship's gravity field around the planet. You focused your will through the console, and you pulled. The planet groaned, a deep, tectonic shudder that you felt in your bones. It resisted for a moment. Then it yielded. It began to move, ever so slightly at first. Then, with gathering speed, you had stolen a planet from its orbit. Of course, an act like that gets noticed. Moving a planet is not exactly subtle. It is the cosmic equivalent of screaming for attention. Alarms you couldn't hear blared in distant monitoring stations. Within minutes, the sky tore open. A series of brilliant flashes announced their arrival. The Star Marshals. Their fleet glittered like angry diamonds against the black. Sharp, white ships in perfect formation. They were the law of the settled systems, and you had just broken their biggest rule. A message cut through the ship's quiet hum. It was a universal hail. "Unidentified vessel," a stern voice said. "You are in violation of the Solis Accords. Release the planet immediately. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded." The voice was calm, confident, the voice of someone who never had to ask twice. For a moment, you felt a spike of pure terror. These were the Star Marshals. Their justice was swift and absolute. But then you felt the ship around you, the immense power thrumming beneath your hand. The planet itself felt like an extension of your body. The fear subsided. It was replaced by something else. A cold, burning defiance. You had woken a giant. You had moved a world. You were not just a scavenger anymore. You would not give up your prize so easily. The Marshals wanted their planet back. They would have to take it. As the Marshal fleet arranged itself into a siege blockade, the ship spoke to you again. Not in a song this time. It sent images directly into your mind. Fragments of memory, flashes of a long-forgotten war. You saw worlds being created, stars being born. This vessel was not a weapon. It was a tool, a shaper of life, a guardian. But it had a secret, a warning. The whispers came from the ship's core. They told you of the planet you now held. It was not just a ball of gas and rock. It was a prison. Deep within its stormy core, something ancient was trapped. Something the ship's creators had locked away eons ago. The ship called it the World Engine, a device of incredible power, a power that could be a terrible threat if it fell into the wrong hands, or if it was awakened by accident. The Star Marshals were a problem, a big one. Their ships were bristling with weapons. Their commander sounded like he didn't enjoy jokes. But the ship made you understand. The Marshals were not the true danger. They were simply a distraction. The real challenge was the puzzle of the planet itself, the sleeping threat it contained. Suddenly, this was not just about your freedom. It was about the safety of the entire system. The ship showed you how to defend yourself. It taught you more about its control over gravity. You were not a warrior. You were a scavenger. But the ship guided your hands. You learned to take the planet's immense gravity well. And you molded it. You wrapped it around the ghost ship like a cloak, a shield that was invisible to their sensors, Light bent around you. Scans passed through you as if nothing was there. To the Marshal fleet, you had vanished. Their commander was not amused. "Evasive maneuvers will not be tolerated," his voice boomed. "Show yourself." You remained silent, hidden in the gravity shadow of your stolen world. The ship showed you more tricks. You could create small, intense pockets of gravity. Little traps that could snag a curious scout ship. You could bend their own sensor waves back at them. You could make them see ghosts and false readings. This was fun. You had to admit it. The planet was no longer a simple prize. It was your fortress. Its swirling storms were your castle walls. Its gravity was your shield. Its sheer mass was your armor. You looked at the Marshal fleet. They were powerful, organized. But they were predictable. They understood force and firepower. They did not understand what you could do. You were an artist, and gravity was your paint. They were about to see your first masterpiece. The Star Marshal's patience wore thin. Your silence was an insult to their authority. Their commander decided a demonstration was in order. Not an attack on you. They still couldn't get a clear lock. An attack on your shield, your planet. He gave the order. A single Marshal cruiser glided forward. A plasma cannon glowed with brilliant, angry energy. Then it fired. A bolt of white-hot plasma, hotter than a sun, streaked across the void. It did not hit your ship. It plunged deep into the planet's upper atmosphere. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. A section of the sky ignited. The swirling clouds of orange and red boiled away, replaced by a flash of searing white light. A wound carved into the face of the giant. It was a warning shot. A message. We can hurt what you are hiding behind. You felt it. Through your connection to the ship, you felt the planet's agony. It was not a sound. It was a psychic scream. A wave of pure energy and pain that slammed into your mind. The planet was a living thing in its own way, and the Marshals had just heard it. Badly. In that moment, something inside you shifted. This was no longer a game of defiance. It was no longer about you. It was personal. They had harmed your world, and for that they would pay. News travels fast in the void, especially news of the impossible. A single, unidentified ship stealing a planet. A lone figure defying the entire Star Marshal fleet. Your silent rebellion was not so silent after all. Your actions were a broadcast, a signal fire seen by anyone with a long-range scanner and a reason to hate the Marshals. And there were many such people. They were the forgotten, the outcasts, the rebels living in the margins of the settled systems. They started to arrive. At first, it was just one or two. A rusty freighter, a modified fighter with more guns than hull. They warped in at the system's edge, cautious, wary. They sent you encrypted messages, not asking for anything, just offering support. Anyone who annoys the Marshals that much is a friend of ours. One message read. You were no longer alone. Soon, more ships came. A small fleet of pirates. A squadron of ex-military deserters. A ship crewed entirely by rogue synthetics. It was a mess. A beautiful, chaotic alliance of misfits. They had nothing in common except a shared enemy, and a sudden, burning loyalty to the girl who stole a planet. They formed a ragged defensive line between you and the Marshal fleet. They were hopelessly outgunned. But their courage was a shield of its own. Your new friends were a welcome sight. But the Marshal's warning shot had done more than just anger you. The massive energy pulse had not faded into space. It had pierced the planet's thick atmosphere. It traveled down, 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 a shock wave plunging into the depths. The ship's mind, your silent co-pilot, suddenly focused your attention. It showed you the path of the energy. It showed you what the energy had touched. Deep below the storms, something had begun to stir. The planet's core was no longer just a dense mass on your gravity map. It was glowing, a faint pulse of light in the darkness. The ship gave you a name for it, a name that echoed with ancient power and awe. The World Engine. The whispers from the core became clearer now. Not just a warning, but an explanation. The engine was a tool of creation, a terraforming device on a scale you could not imagine. It could build a world from dust, but that same power, that raw, creative force, could be used for destruction. It had been dormant for millions of years, sealed away by its creators for safekeeping. But the Marshal's plasma bolt was like a key turning in an ancient lock. The engine was not fully active. Not yet. But it was waking up. And you were the only one who knew it. The only one connected to the system that could control it. The stakes of this fight had just been raised to an impossible level. The fate of a legendary power was now in your hands. The Marshal commander saw your new ragtag fleet. He saw it not as a threat, but as an infestation, a gathering of criminals and terrorists drawn to your chaos. His patience was gone. His professional calm was replaced by cold fury. This standoff had gone on long enough. He gave the order to begin the assault. The time for warnings was over. The siege began. The Marshal fleet moved with terrifying precision. Their cannons opened fire in perfect unison. Beams of energy and kinetic slugs tore across the space between fleets. Your new allies met the charge with a desperate, ragged courage. Their small ships darted and weaved. They fired back with everything they had. But it was like throwing stones against a fortress. For every Marshal ship they scratched, one of their own would vanish in a silent, blossoming fireball. Their comms channel, which you monitored through the ship, was a storm of defiant shouts and frantic reports. Their shields are too strong. Evasive maneuvers, I can't shake them. For the girl, they yelled as their ships were torn apart. You watched as heroes you had never met died to protect you. Each loss was a fresh stab of guilt. You had brought them here. This was your fault. You could not let them sacrifice themselves for nothing. It was time to show the Marshals what real power looked like. You turned your focus away from the battle, away from the dying ships and the enemy fleet. You looked inward, down into the heart of the planet below. The World Engine was thrumming now, a deep, resonant pulse that you could feel through the ship. The ship's mind guided you. It showed you the controls, not buttons or levers, but flows of energy, concepts of power that you had to grasp with your mind. It was like conducting a symphony of cosmic forces. You pushed your will into the engine. You poured all your anger, your grief, your defiance into it. The planet responded. The faint glow at its core intensified. It blazed into a star of brilliant blue light. The entire planet seemed to hum with newfound energy. The storms on its surface churned with impossible speed. Then, from the planet's north pole, a column of light erupted. It was not a laser. It was not plasma. It was a beam of pure, focused gravity. A torrent of raw, untamed, ancient power. The gravity beam sliced through the void. It did not explode on impact. It did not burn or melt. It simply warped. It struck the first Marshal cruiser. The ship did not break apart. It bent. The front of the vessel was pulled forward while the back was pushed away. The ship twisted into an impossible shape, like a toy bent by a careless child. Hull plates groaned and tore, Internal systems shattered. The crew inside experienced a moment of gravitational shear that turned their world into a nightmare. The beam swept across their perfect formation. One ship after another was hit. Their formations, a source of pride and tactical strength, became their undoing. They were too close together. The gravity wave chained between them. A destroyer was thrown into a violent, uncontrolled spin. A carrier was folded in half. Navigation systems across the fleet went haywire. Space itself had become a weapon. The Marshals had fought pirates and rebels. They had never fought anything like this. Panic erupted on their comms channels. What is that energy reading? My nav computer is offline. I've lost control. Fall back. All ships fall back. The disciplined, orderly fleet fractured into a terrified mob. They had come here expecting a simple police action, to put down a lone, foolish criminal. Instead, they had awoken a power from the dawn of time, a power that broke all the known rules of star science, a power wielded by a single, defiant girl in a ghost ship. The Marshal commander watched his fleet tear itself apart. His flagship, the Indomitable, had been hit. Its port side was buckled, its engines were failing. He was a man of order and logic, and he was facing something that defied both. But he was not beaten yet. He had one final, terrible option, a move of last resort. He opened a channel, broadcasting to you directly. His voice was no longer arrogant. It was cold, hard, laced with a terrifying resolve. To the entity controlling the anomaly, he said, "You have demonstrated a power beyond our measure. We concede this battle." You felt a brief flicker of triumph, but he wasn't finished. However, you will not be allowed to keep that planet. You will not be allowed to wield that power. This is my final offer. Surrender the planet and the vessel, or I will order every remaining ship in this fleet to detonate their warp cores. The threat hung in the silence. A fleet of warp cores, exploding in sequence. The resulting tear in space-time would be catastrophic. It would obliterate everything in the system. The Marshal fleet, your fledgling alliance, the ghost ship, and the planet itself. The world engine would be annihilated. He would create a dead zone in space for 1,000 years. A monument to his failure. If he could not have the planet, no one would. You were trapped. He had given you an impossible choice. Surrender and become a prisoner, a lab experiment, or call his bluff and risk the annihilation of everything. The ship's mind was silent. The world engine pulsed below you, awaiting your command. Your allies waited, their fate in your hands. But the ship's mind was not idle. It was showing you something. A third option. A final, desperate gambit. It was insane. The ship showed you a maneuver that should not be possible. You could not outrun the blast of a dozen warp cores. But perhaps you didn't have to. The ship had drives that didn't just bend space. They could perform a short, instantaneous jump, a blink, taking the entire planet with you. The energy required would be immense. It would drain the world engine completely. The strain might tear the planet apart from the inside. It was the ultimate risk. But you looked at the Marshal commander's grim face on your screen. You would not be the queen of a radioactive wasteland. You made your choice. You sent a single defiant message to the Marshal commander. No. Then you cut the channel. You poured every last ounce of your will into the ship and the engine. You linked the ship's ancient jump drive to the raw power of the planet's core. The world beneath you began to vibrate, not with the groan of orbital stress, but with the hum of reality itself being rewritten. On the Marshal flagship, The commander gave his final order. Execute Scorch Protocol. His officers hesitated. Then, one by one, they began the overload sequence. Lights on their consoles turned red. Warning alarms began to scream. Outside, in the silent void, the warp cores of the surviving Marshal ships began to glow with blinding light. You had seconds. You focused on your destination, a system you had only seen in the ship's star charts. A young yellow star, a place of warmth and life. You pulled the trigger. Reality broke. There was a flash of impossible light, a feeling of being turned inside out. Then, silence. You opened your eyes. The Marshal fleet was gone. The cold, distant sun was gone. You were somewhere new. Before you, a brilliant yellow sun bathed your ship in warm light. Below you, the gas giant, your planet, was intact. Its storms were calm. Its colors were vibrant under the new sun. You had done it. You had performed a miracle. The ships of your alliance appeared a moment later. Their own short-range jump drives had followed your wake. Their comms exploded with cheers and disbelief. They looked to you not just as a leader, but as something more, a savior. You had faced down the greatest military power in the sector. You had saved them all. You had saved a world. You looked out at your new home, your new sun. You were no longer a scavenger girl in the dark. You were the master of a ghost ship, the wielder of the world engine. You were the queen of a stolen world. And your reign was just beginning.